Chapter 229. After spending half a day under Han Shua's guidance, Dark Dragon Gilbert finally grasped this evil technique of harvesting yin to replenish yang. Gilbert, who was originally in disbelief, slowly started to have doubts as his body continued to transform. However, before he could confirm it, Gilbert did not dare believe that such a martial technique could have such a miraculous effect. Remember, you can only steal a bit of yin energy at a time. Too much and you'll die. Han Shua cautiously reminded after Gilbert had completely grasped the technique. If this evil technique of harvesting yin to replenish yang could be used appropriately and only absorb a bit of yin energy from a woman's body at a time, it wouldn't cause too much harm to the woman's body. However, if it was used excessively and absorbed too much yin energy, it would harm the woman's body. In serious cases, it could even cause death. Under Han Shua's repeated reminders, Gilbert seemed to understand, but not quite. He grumbled, "Got it, it's hard to say if it's useful or not. I'll tell you after I try it." Afterwards, Han Shua and Gilbert made a trip to the Dwarves' Valley. Leaving Gilbert outside, Han Shua went in and had a chat with village chief Calvin. He handed over the list of materials needed for forging weapons to Calvin, and only left the valley after the negotiations were concluded. With Gilbert's presence, Han Shua saved a lot of effort. Riding on Gilbert's back, the two flew towards the depths of the dark forest, towards the Holy Land where the forest troll lived. After flying for most of the day, Han Shua and Gilbert arrived at the Holy Land of the Forest Troll, the place where the statue of the demon Dadera was worshipped. The forest troll guarding this place all recognized Han Shua. No one stopped Han Shua and allowed Han Shua to enter freely, even shouldering the responsibility of protecting him. Even in the cold winter, the sacred land of the forest trolls and the place of extreme wood displayed a verdant and lush air of spring. Dense vegetation, tall shrubs, and ancient trees that reached into the sky all grew exceptionally strong and healthy. Colorful flowers bloomed all over the sacred mountain valley, and the air was filled with a fresh and mellow fragrance. As far as the eye could see, it was all green and full of vitality. All the plants were so perfectly grown, so unbelievably strong. There were even some exotic flowers and plants that even Han Shua had never heard of before. Any plant would grow very well in the place of extreme earth. Thick earth yuan qi filled the surroundings, and towering ancient trees covered the horizon. The old branches intertwined with each other, strong and powerful. This was why the Holy Land of the Forest Troll could be built on top of these tree trunks. After arriving here, Han Shua first had some of the surrounding forest troll temporarily evacuate from this area of the Holy Land. He then leapt into the air and observed the feng shui of the 5 elements from above. He carefully identified the place according to the descriptions in Chu Kanglin's memories before landing on the roots of an ancient tree. This ancient tree was the tallest and most ancient tree in the place of extreme earth. It was more than 10 meters tall, and its dense branches and leaves were all green. It radiated vitality and looked quite old. After staring at the largest ancient tree for a while, Han Shua finally said apologetically, "I'm sorry, you've occupied the best spot. You'll have to hand over the earth yuan qi you've absorbed bit by bit. I can only sacrifice you." As he spoke, Han Shua's thoughts moved and a beam of divine light flew out of his body, landing in Han Shua's palm. Han Shua then began to dig at the thick roots of the ancient tree without hesitation. "Honored Master, do you need my help?" Gilbert volunteered when he saw that Han Shua had begun to dig at the roots of the ancient tree the size of a small mountain. After thinking for a bit, Han Shua nodded and stopped what he was doing. He said, "I don't need your help, but you've reminded me that I don't need to do anything myself with the Earth Elite Zombie here." Han Shua chanted a necromancy incantation as soon as he finished speaking. The 2 dark creatures, the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, were simultaneously summoned by Han Shua. The Little Skull's bones were as translucent as jade, and a faint spiritual light circulated within his purple demon eye. He stood there with the bone dagger in his hand, and actually gave off a strong killing aura. The 7 bone spurs on his back gave off an extremely sinister and dangerous feeling, as if they were 7 lethal weapons. The Earth Elite Zombie's eyes sparkled with an earthy yellow light that was the same color as his body. The armor that covered his entire body was like a thick layer of yellow earth. He was blinking his eyes at this moment, looking at Han Shuo with confusion. He seemed to be saying, "Everything's fine, why did you suddenly call me over?" From the appearance of the little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, Han Shuo discovered that the two seemed to be constantly evolving. The little skull in particular gave Han Shuo an indescribable feeling. He always felt that after his intelligence was unlocked, his actions became more and more assertive, as if he already had a strange momentum. "I'll give you a mission. Dig out 49 holes of various sizes in this area according to my wishes. In addition, use ditches to connect the holes." Han Shuo mused for a moment and spoke to the Earth Elite Zombie, who was blinking his eyes. The well-behaved Earth Elite Zombie nodded naively, blinking his eyes at Han Shuo. However, he didn't immediately take action, seeming to wait for Han Shuo's more specific instructions. Han Shuo immediately reacted after staring blankly. He sat down cross-legged and organized his memories in his mind. His brain was like a marvelous machine, first projecting the entire area of the place of extreme wood into his mind. He then divided the 49 holes of various sizes according to Chu Kanglin's memories, placing them on the scene of the place of extreme earth in his mind. When Han Shuo finished all this, he had a complete picture of the entire scene in his mind. He then issued an order, and the Earth Elite Zombie immediately descended into the ground. Suddenly, the ground of the entire place of extreme wood began to churn violently, as if a wriggling earth dragon was continuously moving about underground. In the blink of an eye, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed. Mounds of earth appeared one after another. The Earth Elite Zombie's body was like a small dragon wantonly tossing and turning in the surging waves of the ocean. Every time he emerged from the earth, a hole of various sizes would appear. Chapter 230. Han Shuo was stunned for a moment. He stared blankly at the tall and thin zombie warrior, then his eyes shifted between Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. Finally, he asked in amazement, "One of us? One of you?" Nodding their heads in unison, Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie looked rather pleased with themselves. They gestured something at Han Shuo with their empty hands, and pieces of messy information were transmitted into Han Shuo's mind like electric waves. After a while, Han Shuo sorted out the pieces of information and his heart was filled with shock. He looked at the two little fellows in disbelief and exclaimed, "You're saying that you have your own subordinates and forces in another world?" The two fellows puffed out their chests at the same time, their expressions extremely pleased. They looked as if they were cackling and nodding. It was obvious that Han Shuo had hit the nail on the head. On the other side, Dark Dragon Gilbert watched as Han Shuo slowly communicated with the two creatures. He also felt that it was unimaginable and couldn't help but let out an to express his astonishment. After recovering from his shock, Han Shuo quickly thought about it and couldn't help but laugh out loud, "Not bad, not bad. You've done a good job." With Han Shuo's current understanding of necromancy magic, he clearly knew that as he continued to improve, he would one day be able to directly pass through the constraints of space and descend to that magical plane with Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. In addition, if Han Shuo reached the realm of a sacred Magus necromancer, he could even set up a large-scale transportation matrix to directly connect to the two worlds outside and transport soldiers. If Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie developed a powerful force in another plane, when Han Shuo's necromancy magic reached a certain level, he would be able to share resources. This made Han Shuo very excited. Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie were overjoyed to hear Han Shuo's praise. Little Skull pointed at the zombie warrior he was carrying, then at the hole beside him, indicating that Han Shuo would use this zombie warrior to refine it into a wood elite zombie that could use wood energy. Nodding his head, Han Shuo smiled to express his understanding. He waved at Little Skull, indicating that he should drop the thin and tall zombie warrior into the hole. When Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie carried the zombie warrior to the hole, Little Skull put it down and raised his head to look at the zombie warrior. The purple light in his purple demon eye flickered continuously, as if he was issuing some order to the zombie warrior. After a while, Little Skull stood on his tiptoes and patted the zombie warrior's shoulder comically, like a general encouraging his subordinates, conveying the message of, "Do a good job." The thin and tall zombie warrior seemed to only have the intelligence to obey. After receiving the order from the purple demon eye, it nodded clumsily and stiffly, as if it understood Little Skull's meaning. It jumped into the hole and laid down obediently, looking at Han Shuo with eager eyes, waiting for Han Shuo's next move. Seeing that everything was in place, Han Shuo took a deep breath and dripped 2 drops of blood essence into the zombie warrior's body with practiced ease. He then released a seal of darkness magic to form a deeper connection with the zombie warrior. Afterwards, Han Shuo sat down cross-legged and gave an order to the Earth Elite Zombie. Rays of black light shot out from his hand and fell into the zombie warrior's body. Upon receiving Han Shuo's order, the Earth Elite Zombie leapt into the soil as if diving into the water, disappearing in an instant like a loach. All that could be seen was an earth dragon wriggling around the entire scene. The 49 holes were quickly covered up and became flat, exactly the same as before. When Han Shuo's last few hand seals fell into the body of the thin and tall zombie warrior, the soil around the hole seemed to be attracted by some kind of power, covering the zombie warrior's body in an extremely short amount of time. Then, the Earth Elite Zombie rose up from the ground and even clapped his hands, revealing an expression that said it was a piece of cake. "Wood Aura, obey my command and return immediately." Han Shuo formed a seal with both hands and roared. A ball of black light fell into the place where the thin and tall zombie warrior was. All of a sudden, the 49 caves that had been restored to their original state seemed to be connected by many green natural threads, forming a dense web that looked like it had been weaved by spiders. At the center of the web was the place where the tall and thin zombie warrior was hiding. In an instant, the rich Earth Yuan energy seemed to be connected by the many green ribbons, as all of it converged towards the center of the zombie. From afar, it looked like many small streams were converging towards the river in the center, giving off a strong visual impact. Some of the verdant weeds in the furthest distance slowly withered and turned yellow. Even the originally sturdy branches of the largest old tree seemed to slowly undergo changes that were difficult to see with the naked eye due to the loss of the earth aura. All of this was absorbed by the thin and tall zombie warrior in the center. For the sake of his existence, all of the surrounding greenery would eventually wither and die. This is truly miraculous. Master, how did you do this? Dark Dragon Gilbert couldn't help but exclaim as he looked at the enormous changes that had taken place in the entire scene. All of the plants in the surroundings of the place of extreme wood will have to spit out the earth aura that they have absorbed over the years. The day the Wood Elite Zombie takes form will also be the day their branches and leaves wither and turn yellow. They will be completely finished. Survival of the fittest. Every living thing in this environment is survival of the fittest. This is their fate. Han Shuo said callously. Gilbert looked around and finally fixed his gaze on the Earth Elite Zombie and the little skull. What do we do now? Nothing. We'll leave this place and make a trip to the Forest Troll's residence. This place is guarded by the Forest Troll warriors, so there shouldn't be any problems. The changes here will become more and more obvious as time passes. I'll instruct the Forest Troll not to worry about it. When that zombie absorbs the wood aura here and becomes a Wood Elite Zombie, he will naturally contact me. When that happens, I'll come over and wake him up. Han Shuo explained faintly. Together with the little skull, Gilbert and the Earth Elite Zombie, they left the perimeter of the place of extreme wood and headed straight for the village where the Forest Troll resided. It looks like this dark forest is indeed mysterious beyond compare. Let's not fly in the air, lest we attract the attention of some powerful creatures. When Han Shuo had felt that powerful presence, he had immediately released the 3 demons to scout the surroundings. However, Han Shuo had no way of identifying where this presence had come from. The 3 demons circled the surroundings and didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. This not only didn't make Han Shuo relax, but instead made Han Shuo even more cautious. Strangely, the depths of the dark forest didn't seem to be affected by the cold winter. The frigid winds disappeared as the two ventured deeper, and the temperature also gradually rose. It was a bit similar to the scene in the place of extreme wood. This place was lush and verdant, with ancient trees reaching the sky and dense shrubs. Springs gurgled along the way, and a few hot springs were scattered everywhere, with white mist rising in spirals. With the help of the Yin demon's vision, Han Shuo saw all kinds of ferocious high-level magical creatures appear continuously in some places. Harpies, deep-water venom pythons, frost eagles, medusae, manticores, these rare high-level magical creatures continuously appeared in the Yin demon's vision. Sometimes, it wasn't just one or two. These high-level magical creatures were rarely seen in the outskirts of the dark forest. Often, there would only be one of these high-level magical creatures in a large area. Ordinary adventurers would flee in panic when they encountered them, deathly afraid of being ambushed. However, in the depths of the dark forest, they had become the most common of existences, and were no longer so rare and peculiar. In some special places, there were many strange flowers and plants that Han Shuo had never heard of or seen before. These strange flowers and plants grew enormous flower buds. Han Shuo saw through the Yin demons that a windblade wolf would twist miraculously when it passed by a flower bud, instantly sucking the windblade wolf's body into its stamen. The thick roots chewed and sucked like a neck, quickly digesting the windblade wolf amidst the thick blood. Not even the bones were spat out. There were also some strange plants whose branches and leaves intertwined like human hands. They also possessed terrifying destructive power. Once a magical creature approached them, it would be wrapped around by their thick branches and strangled to death bit by bit. Follow me and be careful. There are dangers everywhere in the dark forest. No wonder Trunks kept telling me that although the rewards would be greater the deeper we go, we could also lose our lives at any time. Han Shuo moved forward carefully and spoke calmly to Gilbert. However, Han Shuo himself lost his cool as soon as he'd finished speaking. His body shot out with a whoosh and he rushed towards something with a face full of joy. At this moment, the two long necks of the Hydra were dripping with fresh blood. The other 7 heads shook their heads and waved their tails. The towering tree that it was entrenched in seemed to be unable to withstand the Hydra's painful struggle. After a loud creak, it suddenly broke and collapsed, bringing the Hydra's body down with it. At this moment, a huge ravine suddenly split open on the brown ground. An earth-shaking sound came from the depths of the earth. There seemed to be a terrifying danger waiting for the Hydra to fall. As a rank-surpassing magical beast, the 9-headed Hydra naturally possessed the ability to fly. Its massive body swayed unsteadily due to the pain as it gradually descended. However, when one of the snake heads accidentally saw that the ground below had suddenly split open into a huge ravine, the 9-headed snake was scared out of its wits. It hurriedly and continuously struggled. In the end, its swaying body actually magically stopped in the void and slowly flew into the distance. In the face of the threat of death, the Hydra's struggle with all its might seemed to be effective. However, the attack from the ground wasn't just limited to that. The Hydra had just flown a short distance when it suddenly discovered that several sharp mounds of earth had risen from the ground and were rushing towards its body. In that moment, the Hydra was incomparably vexed. It hadn't expected that its ambush this time would lead to such a situation. According to its original plan, after getting close to Han Shuo and Gilbert, it could use its highly toxic venom to subdue the Dragon Knight Han Shuo through the spread of the poisonous smoke, and then take care of the little black dragon that was a rank lower than it. Unfortunately, Han Shuo, who had diligently trained in demonic arts, didn't fall for the attack of the poisonous smoke as it had hoped. The appearance of the little skull and the Earth Elite zombie further boosted Han Shuo's strength and completely destroyed the Hydra's plan. The 9 snake heads suddenly shook, their slender necks swaying continuously. The few mounds that the Earth Elite zombie had created were blocked by the venom that the snake heads had spat out, and the ferocious impact hindered the power of the mounds. During this process, the Hydra's body gradually rose, and as soon as it dodged the Earth Elite zombie's mound attack, it frantically flew towards the pool of water that it had come from. A thick stream of magma flame was abnormally glaring in the pitch-black night sky as it abruptly crashed into one of the snake heads. A ghastly cry rang out, and the Hydra's enormous body stumbled as it fled. Some of the surrounding trees that passed by snapped under the impact of its enormous body. Some of the magical creatures in the surroundings fled in panic, fleeing as far as they could. Waha, a rank 2 fellow still has to run. Chapter 233. Han Shuo stood high up in the sky, dumbfounded as he looked at the changes below. For a moment, he was stunned, and his entire person froze. Gilbert and the Hydra had become two naked mud men entangled together. The original battle had actually turned into another form of battle. Moreover, the battle was in full swing, and the waves were roaring incessantly. Han Shuo was greatly surprised as he watched. The race of black dragons were lascivious, and every Hydra was a female. They were not good birds, and had always been synonymous with obscenity. These two creatures could turn from a battle into a battle. As expected, they were very powerful, and it directly shocked Han Shuo. The two mud people were entangled with each other and rolled around in the mud. Because their bodies were covered in mud, it was impossible to see their original appearances. Only the curvaceous body of the Hydra was able to distinguish the characteristics of a woman. The lewd Hydra had big breasts and plump buttocks, and was entangled with the black dragon. They were in the midst of intense copulation, and the sound of intense panting was incessant, resounding in the quiet night sky, stirring one's soul. Han Shuo, who was watching excitedly, felt that it was unimaginable. Suddenly, he felt someone tugging at the corner of his clothes. He couldn't help but look back, and saw the little skull with 7 bone spurs flashing. The little skull's purple demon eye shone brightly, and it stretched out a white bone claw to point at the black dragon and Hydra who were engaged in the act below. It asked Han Shuo, "What are they doing?" Han Shuo, the little skull tugged at the corner of Han Shuo's clothes again, and the purple light in its purple demon eye flowed. It seemed to be very confused, as if it couldn't understand what was happening. It sent another message to ask Han Shuo. The black dragon is conquering it. Children shouldn't ask so many questions. Han Shuo couldn't argue with it, and so he gave a strange smile. Half of the Earth Elite zombie's body was buried in the ground at some unknown time. He waved his 2 arms wildly, looking at the 2 people in the quagmire in great bewilderment. He seemed to be considering whether or not he should approach and attack. That quagmire was very wide and contained a large amount of poisonous liquid. If the Earth Elite zombie rushed inside, he wouldn't be able to fully utilize his abilities. Adding to that, the current situation was very strange. Han Shuo hastily used his consciousness to stop the Earth Elite zombie's movements. Gradually, the 2 people who were originally above the quagmire slowly fell into it and disappeared from Han Shuo's sight. However, the huge movement in the quagmire did not disappear with it. Han Shuo knew that this lecherous dragon and lecherous snake's great battle didn't stop when the figure disappeared. It just moved to the bottom of the quagmire. Seeing that he couldn't find anything, Han Shuo descended from the sky and landed beside the Earth Elite zombie. He patted the Earth Elite zombie's shoulder and praised, "Well done." Previously, the Earth Elite zombie hid in the ground and used his manipulation of the power of the Earth to pose a huge threat to the Hydra. That kind of ability to tear the Earth into ravines made Han Shuo very excited. This meant that the Earth Elite zombie had spent some time with the little skull and had indeed developed a very good combat awareness. Up until now, the Hydra should be unable to pose any threat to Han Shuo. Therefore, after Han Shuo landed and praised the Earth Elite zombie, he once again chanted an incantation and sent the little skull and the Earth Elite zombie back to their home. Then, Han Shuo flew to a towering tree on the side of the quagmire and sat cross-legged on the trunk. He silently adjusted his breathing while paying attention to the movements in the quagmire. Chapter 234. The enormous Cyclops displayed its powerful physique to its heart's content. Along the way, the earth shook, the mountains shook, ancient trees snapped, and all beasts retreated. Even in the dark forest where danger lurked on every side and super-rank magical creatures frequently roamed, there were still very few creatures who were willing to provoke a creature as powerful as the Cyclops. It wasn't an easy thing to become enemies with such a big fellow. Han Shuo and Gilbert followed the tracks the Cyclops had left behind and caught up to him without much effort. In order to avoid attracting his attention, Han Shuo rode on Gilbert's dragon body and purposefully kept a large distance from the Cyclops. Following behind the Cyclops, Han Shuo paid close attention to his surroundings along the way. He actually discovered a few powerful presences that seemed to be interested in the Cyclops' movements. However, these presences also purposefully avoided the Cyclops and hid far away, unwilling to approach him. They only followed the tracks the Cyclops had left behind, seeming to have the same intentions as Han Shuo. When Han Shuo sensed these powerful presences, he immediately had Gilbert transform into his human form and used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to drag Gilbert along. This was to prevent Gilbert's enormous size from attracting the attention of these powerful creatures and becoming their prey. The three Yin demons were placed in the surroundings, constantly on the lookout for danger that could descend at any time. Danger was everywhere in the dark forest, and Han Shuo had to be cautious. The Cyclops' towering body covered a distance of 5 to 6 meters with each step. After a period of turbulent travel, they finally entered a small mountain, Tunai. Tunai's waterfall flowed freely, the trees were verdant, the small lake was clear, and the flowers were beautiful. There were a few strange rocks of various colors at the bottom of the clear river. Under the illumination of the sunlight, they shone with gentle light, causing the small river to shimmer with a phosphorescent light and accentuate the colors of the swimming fish. Strangely, when the Cyclops arrived at the valley, his previously reckless footsteps suddenly became cautious. He was very careful with each step, as if afraid of breaking the tranquility of the valley and alarming some powerful creature. Han Shuo, who was following the Cyclops from afar, hid in a crack on a cliff above the valley. He focused his gaze on the valley below, paying attention to the Cyclops' movements. The Cyclops arrived at the valley and carefully walked forward with light steps. As he walked, he untied the huge iron shovel on his back and walked straight towards the small lake where the waterfall fell. To Han Shuo's surprise, the lake was very deep. When the Cyclops' 10-meter-tall body fell into the lake water actually reached up to his shoulders. No matter how careful the Cyclops was, he still caused the water to ripple violently the moment he fell into the lake. The colorful fish fled in all directions in fright. The clear water around him gradually became murky, clearly affected by his footsteps. When the Cyclops waved his hands and used the iron shovel in his hands to work, the water in the lake became even more turbulent, and the clear surface of the lake became murkier and murkier. Huge rocks were sent out of the lake by the swing of the iron shovel. The Cyclops only needed a glance to distinguish the useful ones from the useless ones. Once the useful rocks were shoveled to the shore, he would immediately put them away and continue his work. The rocks dug out by the Cyclops were all covered in mud and silt. Han Shuo couldn't tell what kind of rocks they were, but since the Cyclops had taken a liking to them and made him secretly dig for them from thousands of kilometers away, they shouldn't be easily obtainable. Suddenly, a few powerful auras descended from different directions near the valley. They all locked their attention on the Cyclops, as if waiting for something. In an instant, Han Shuo's breathing calmed and his heartbeat slowed. He began to deliberately conceal his movements to avoid being discovered and causing unnecessary trouble. As a super-rank magical beast, Gilbert also had a miraculous method of concealing himself. Under Han Shuo's gaze, he slowly dove into the flowing river of the lake and continued to sink until he reached the bottom of the swamp. As an evil race in the underground world, dark dragons had an innate talent for hiding in swamps. When Gilbert dove into the swamp, the flowing river water and mud obstructed his detection. Even Han Shuo had to carefully sense his surroundings in order to vaguely find traces of him. After concealing his body, the three Yin demons carefully circled around the mountain valley under Han Shuo's control. They slowly closed in on a few directions based on the auras they sensed. First, on the branch of a 7-meter-tall old tree stood an old woman with wrinkles all over her face, wearing a fiery red mage robe. From the magic insignia on her robe, Han Shuo discovered that this old woman was actually a fire grand magus. Her gaze didn't linger on the Cyclops. Instead, she kept looking around, as if she was more interested in the valley itself. The second person was a middle-aged man with a handsome and robust appearance. His short golden hair stood on end, and he seemed to be in high spirits. He stopped behind a rock and focused his attention on the Cyclops. This middle-aged man had a strange aura that was actually somewhat similar to that of Dark Dragon Gilbert. When Han Shuo used this feeling to carefully size up the middle-aged man, he suddenly realized that this middle-aged man should be an adult golden dragon. The third powerful creature landed in the shrubbery. It was a giant ape around 4 meters tall, with long silver fur and a pair of blood-red eyes. The nails at the ends of its slender arms were as sharp as knives, and there were even traces of blood on them, as if it had just torn apart a magical beast. The last person was a beautiful girl on a Pegasus, hovering in the air. Her teeth were white, her eyes were bright, and her skin was fair. Her beautiful and flawless face exuded a holy aura. She sat on the Pegasus, her slender body straight and her chest high and full. Her attention was also focused on the Cyclops. Through the prying eyes of the 3 Yin demons, Han Shuo observed the 4 powerful beings hidden in the valley one by one. He couldn't help but be shocked. The dark forest was indeed a frightening place. A single Cyclops had attracted so many experts. 4 powerful creatures, 2 magical beasts, and 2 humans. The middle-aged man was, of course, the transformation of the super-rank magical beast Golden Dragon. Golden dragons were one of the strongest races of dragons, and their strength was publicly recognized. The middle-aged man's aura was as distant and heavy as a mountain. He was a powerful existence that had evolved at least 3 times, and definitely wasn't something that the little dark dragon who had just made her debut could compare to. The silver-eyed giant ape had a 4-meter-tall body. Just from the sharpness and coldness of its fingertips, Han Shuo could keenly sense that they were stained with the blood of the powerful humans and beasts of the dark forest. The smell of blood permeated the air around it. Although he didn't know what kind of mutated monster it was, the powerful aura was definitely not weak. The wrinkled old woman was a fire grand magus. Her use of fire magic had already reached the pinnacle, and her strength was absolutely shocking and terrifying. Only the beautiful girl on the Pegasus was left. Han Shuo couldn't judge her strength from her appearance, but the fact that she dared to appear here made Han Shuo believe that she wasn't an easy opponent to deal with. If it wasn't for her extreme confidence in her own strength, she definitely wouldn't have appeared in this place. When Han Shuo observed the 4 powerful creatures hiding in the dark through the Yin demons, he immediately communicated with Gilbert and told him to stop moving, in case he suffered an unexpected calamity. Roar! A loud roar suddenly rang out from the depths of the earth. The entire mountain valley shook, and the rocks on the cliffs shook and fell towards the small lake and river. This roar came from the depths of the earth and revealed boundless rage. The 4 powerful creatures watching in the dark all had different expressions when they heard this loud roar. The golden dragon and the beautiful girl on the Pegasus were both startled and seemed to be caught off guard. They didn't know what had happened, and their gazes moved away from the Cyclops to look towards the lake and river. The fire grand magus and the giant silver ape seemed to understand what had happened, and their expressions were filled with unconcealable excitement. After a loud roar, the temperature of the small valley, which was originally at a comfortable temperature, soared. The small lake and the cool river water suddenly became like a hot spring. Steam rose from them and gradually spread throughout the valley. The Cyclops obviously also knew what had happened. His originally gentle movements immediately sped up, as if he was hiding from something. He wanted to obtain more of the strange ores in the lake in the shortest amount of time possible, and frantically increased his pace of work. Following the loud rumbling sounds, Tanai's earth trembled and the lake and river seemed to split open from the ground. The temperature in the mountain valley rose steadily, and a few tender flowers were the first to wither, unable to withstand the heat. Afterwards, some shrubs and leaves dried up and cracked, gradually emitting thick smoke. Gilbert, who was hiding in the depths of the mud, suddenly felt the temperature of the water skyrocket. Even his strong body couldn't withstand it, and he almost turned into a roasted dragon. He couldn't help but want to leave the mud and escape. However, Han Shuo discovered that the 4 powerful creatures hidden in the surroundings had all raised their attention to the maximum. A thick killing intent permeated the valley, as if a great battle was about to begin at any moment. Han Shuo was greatly alarmed and hurriedly tried to stop the dark dragon with all his might, dispelling any thoughts of leaving the bottom of the river, lest he become the first target. When Han Shuo strongly tried to stop the dark dragon, he gave him the order to make use of the mud to leave the mountain valley first. This was to prevent him from becoming the target of everyone's attacks and ending up with a miserable death. Gilbert forcefully endured the danger of his body being burned and used his innate ability as a dark dragon to quickly move towards a place where the temperature was lower. He gradually left the area of the mountain valley and disappeared along the direction of the river. Not long after the dark dragon's body left, a terrifying roar sounded from the depths of the earth. It was as if the river and lake had been torn apart as underground fire erupted from the mountain valley. Magma bubbled out of the lake and river, the scorching heat making anyone feel extremely uncomfortable. In the middle of the river where the magma had gathered, a dozen or so fiery red stone giants that seemed to be made of magma slowly bent their bodies and stood up. These stone giants were as red as branding iron, and there seemed to be magma constantly churning within their bodies. Each of them was as tall as the giant silver ape, and magma flowed from their eyes, making them appear extremely terrifying and sinister. As the rolling magma spread, they charged towards the Cyclops. "It's the Flame Demon Battle General. It's here indeed." The Fire Grand Magus couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and excitement. The giant silver ape had a sinister appearance, and a fierce light flickered in its blood-red eyes. At this moment, it was anxiously waving its two thick arms, as if planning to rush forward and fight, but also hesitating and waiting for something. The Golden Dragon and the Pegasus Girl seemed to only be targeting the Cyclops and obviously hadn't encountered such a situation. They stood there in a daze for a moment, rapidly thinking about something. Just as the four experts lurking in the dark were contemplating what to do, the Flame Demon Generals made of lava stood up straight from the river and charged at the Cyclops. At this moment, the Cyclops didn't dare to stay here any longer. It picked up its shovel and once again took heavy steps, planning to leave the mountain valley as soon as possible and avoid the attacks of the Flame Demon Battle Generals. Sensing the rising temperature of the Tanai, the surrounding ground rapidly cracked and all the plants and flowers withered in an extremely short amount of time. The scorching heat from the depths of the earth made Han Shuo feel extremely uncomfortable. However, at this moment, Han Shuo instead closed his eyes and relaxed his body, as if he wanted to feel everything around him more clearly. After a while, Han Shuo opened his eyes. His eyes sparkled as he gazed at the mountain valley that had turned into a sea of fire. He murmured, "Yes, yes, the place of extreme fire should be down there." Chapter 235. Roar. Another terrifying roar came from the depths of the earth. The valley shook violently under the roar, and large pieces of rocks rolled down from the cliffs. The boulders that formed the waterfall creaked as if they would collapse at any time. An extremely powerful aura leaked out from the depths of the cracked ground. The impact of the powerful sound waves caused the withered trees to collapse and the ground to rapidly crack, forming huge ravines. Han Shuo's three Yin demons didn't spread out to observe the surroundings at this time. They immediately retracted to his side and surveyed the surroundings. Their bodies had been stuck close to the rocks, but because of the scorching heat, the rocks were already as red as branding iron. Han Shuo had no choice but to temporarily take to the air. Accompanied by the impact of the terrifying sound waves, the Flame Demon Generals that walked out of the lava attacked the Cyclops without any hesitation. Streams of lava intertwined with each other as they flew out from the river of lava under the control of the Flame Demon Generals, shooting towards the Cyclops' enormous body. 3 4-meter-tall Flame Demon Generals walked out from the depths of the ground and blocked the Cyclops' path of retreat. They charged towards the Cyclops with blazing flames all over their bodies. The Cyclops' enormous body was twice the size of the Flame Demon Generals. His green muscles were as hard as granite, and the huge iron shovel he held in his hands became his weapon of defense. Every swing of the shovel carried a violent force, bringing a violent gust of hot wind to the valley. Crackling sounds could be heard coming from the Cyclops' side. Every time he waved his shovel, a stream of lava would be slashed to the side. Blazing sparks flew everywhere as the red rocks wrapped in lava shattered and shot in all directions. Some of the withered trees and flowers in the surroundings were immediately set ablaze when they came into contact with the flaming rocks. The raging flames quickly spread and enveloped the entire valley in a sea of fire. A fiery red rock the size of a head was swung by the Cyclops, carrying a high temperature and emitting thick flames. It shattered from the lava and shot towards Han Shuo. The raging flames carried a violent force, forcing Han Shuo to retreat in a sorry state. With a rumble, the fiery rock the size of a head smashed into the hard rock that Han Shuo had been standing on. Brilliant sparks flew everywhere as the blazing flames burned on the rock. It was so wondrous that one couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Firespark stone was an excellent material for forging weapons. Han Shuo stared at the burning rock with bright eyes. He immediately recognized the wondrous rock from the blazing flames surrounding it. It was the Firespark stone, a material that cultivators greatly needed for forging weapons. He extended his left hand, and a ball of purple demonic fire rose from his palm like a ghost. It shrouded the Firespark stone with a bone-chilling aura. When the blazing heat and the bone-chilling aura came into contact, thick white smoke immediately rose, accompanied by a sizzling sound. Feeling the effects of the mystical glacial spell fire, Han Shuo immediately circulated his magical yuan. The ball of purple flames that covered the Firespark stone jumped even more alluringly. Clouds of dense white mist rose from the Firespark stone. Under the assault of the bone-chilling aura, the blazing Firespark stone slowly extinguished and returned to calmness. Finally, it became an ordinary fiery red rock, sparkling with a resplendent red light like a ruby. When he saw that the flames on the Firespark stone had been extinguished, Han Shuo's face lit up with joy. He immediately put the head-sized Firespark stone into his space ring, in case he needed to use it when he wanted to refine weapons in the future. He fiercely swung the huge iron shovel in his hand, chopping 2 flame demon generals into a few large pieces of rock that melted into the river with astonishing momentum. However, some of the scorching hot lava landed on the Cyclops' azure body, causing a large area to be charred black. The Cyclops also groaned in pain. One of its eyes was filled with anxiety as it looked towards the depths of the river from time to time, as if it was afraid that some powerful creature would suddenly break through the ground and walk out. The Fire Grand Magus was completely enveloped in a red magic shield. The old woman within the magic shield had an excited expression as her old eyes shone with light. Her attention was focused on the depths of the lava, as if she was waiting for something. The robust golden dragon was drenched from head to toe in the high temperature of Mountain Tanai. He slowly moved towards the outside of the mountain valley, as if he was preparing to take the opportunity to attack the Cyclops. The giant silver ape's shiny silver fur stood up like steel needles. A few sparks landed on its silver fur, but there wasn't a single trace of being charred. Its 2 steel claws clenched and relaxed repeatedly, and its blood-red eyes focused on the depths of the river of lava, but it didn't dare to approach. Roar! Another loud roar rang out, and the mountain valley really started to collapse. The earth was also torn apart. The underground creature was truly enraged now, as if blaming the flame demon generals for their incompetence. Fissures appeared in the ground, and even more lava burst out, shooting in all directions like a fountain. In an extremely short period of time, the beautiful scenery of the entire mountain valley no longer existed. An enormous creature over 10 meters tall stood up from the largest crack in the ground, along with the rolling lava. This enormous creature had a pointed head and a round lower body. Its entire body was red like hot iron, just like the flame demon generals. It was like a moving, burning volcano, and an enormous aura emanated from its body. The sky seemed to be set ablaze, and large patches of fiery clouds covered the sky above the mountain valley, causing the sky and earth to become one color, becoming a kingdom of flames. The heavens fell and the earth cracked, and the rocks of the mountain valley came crashing down. After this enormous creature walked out from the depths of the earth, its enormous body swayed backwards, causing even more lava to shoot out in all directions. It was truly a volcanic eruption. It's actually the Lord of the Flames. No wonder the flame demon generals have appeared. The beautiful girl beside Han Shuo cried out in surprise. She got off her Pegasus and shouted softly, "Leave this place, quickly." The Pegasus that was infatuated with the temperature around Han Shuo was clearly very happy when it heard the girl's order. It flew up gracefully, planning to leave this place of trouble. However, the terrifying Lord of the Flames and its raging flames burned the earth. The fiery clouds in the sky weren't fake. Chapter 236. The Fire's Park stone had finally been collected by Han Shuo. However, the entire mountain valley had been sealed off by fire. The 6 powerful beings, including Han Shuo, were all trapped within the mountain valley. In such an area where volcanoes erupted and lava sprayed everywhere, the 6 powerful beings with ulterior motives would all face the wrath of the Lord of the Flames. No one would be able to escape unscathed. After the Fire's Park stone entered the space ring, the purple flames in Han Shuo's palms extinguished and the surrounding temperature once again skyrocketed. The sweat on Han Shuo's body converged like a small river and flowed downwards. The beautiful girl and the Pegasus had no choice but to descend to the ground in the face of the fiery clouds. They looked up at the fiery clouds and sighed helplessly. It looked like they didn't dare to rashly charge into the air above the burning mountain valley. The Fire Grand Magus in the distance floated between Han Shuo and the girl like the wind with a bright red magic shield. She smiled faintly. The 3 of us are all humans, so I think it'll be easier for us to communicate. It'll be easier for us to survive if we're united against a common enemy. What do you think? In the face of such terrifying danger, joining forces with the strong was indeed a good choice. Apart from the Lord of the Flames, Tanai also had the giant silver ape, the Cyclops, and the golden dragon. These 3 powerful beings were equally strong, but it was a pity that they weren't humans and weren't good partners to work with. Of course, only by working together will we be able to walk out of this fiery kingdom alive. Han Shuo naturally knew that he didn't have the confidence to deal with any of the Tanai experts by himself. This Fire Grand Magus seemed to know what would happen. Although he didn't know what she was planning, he could at least wait and see. That's a good idea, Granny. The beautiful girl revealed a radiant smile and spoke in a clear and melodious voice. The Fire Grand Magus seemed to have long since known that Han Shuo and the beautiful girl would agree. She lightly waved the magic staff in her left hand and chanted a profound incantation. With Han Shuo's group of 3 as the center, a house-sized barrier was instantly formed. This barrier was invisible and formless, but it isolated the high temperature. The surrounding lava that was erupting was blocked outside. After the old lady created the barrier, the magic shield on her body disappeared. She smiled at Han Shuo and the girl, and introduced herself. I'm Marceau from the Brute Merchant Alliance. I major in fire magic. Brian Han, from Lancelot Empire, a necromancer. Han Shuo replied. Sophie, I come from the Kasi Empire. I am a knight. He can be considered half an incompetent summoner. The beautiful Pegasus girl replied simply. As soon as she finished speaking, she softly chanted a spell, and the Pegasus she had been riding magically disappeared without a trace. The old lady Marceau and the girl called Sophie seemed to have heard of each other's names. When the 2 of them introduced themselves, the other revealed a surprised expression. Only Han Shuo was unknown. Marceau and Sophie clearly hadn't heard of Han Shuo before, and both looked at Han Shuo with some confusion. Anyone who could fly in the air and appear here was definitely not a nameless person. As a powerful practitioner of necromancy magic, if there was such a person in the Lancelot Empire, they would definitely have heard of him. Therefore, when Marceau and Sophie realized that they hadn't heard of Han Shuo's name, they thought that Han Shuo had given them a fake name. Faced with the 2's confusion, Han Shuo shrugged his shoulders and explained with a wry smile, I'm telling the truth. I've only just started my career, so it's normal that I'm not well known. There's nothing strange about it. The red rocks that sealed the valley suddenly exploded, and a 5 to 6 meter wide passageway appeared in the valley that had been blocked by the Lord of the Flames. The Golden Dragon was one of the dragons with the most shocking battle prowess, and its physical body possessed the strongest offensive and defensive abilities. After transforming, the Golden Dragon was even more ferocious and wild, and had always been synonymous with strength and power. Even the valley that had been sealed by the Lord of the Flames flint was forcefully blasted open by its fierce dragon's breath. This Lord of the Flames is a super-rank magical beast that has evolved 4 times, while this Golden Dragon has only evolved 3 times. It's a wise decision for it to give up on seeking revenge against the Cyclops and leave the valley for now. Fire Grand Magus Marceau calmly explained to Han Shoa and Sophie as she watched the commotion in the distance. Roar, the Lord of the Flames let out an earth-shattering howl. It naturally thought that the golden dragon's breath was a provocation, and let out a loud howl to vent the anger in its heart. In that moment, the flowing lava and the flaming clouds in the sky seemed to be under the Lord of the Flames' control as they all gathered towards the passageway that the golden dragon had blasted open. Before the golden dragon could leave the valley, the passageway that had just been blasted open was once again blocked by lava, flames, and flaming clouds. This time, the passageway was even tighter than last time. The golden dragon was completely enraged in that moment. As one of the most prideful of super-rank magical beasts, the golden dragon had already given the Lord of the Flames a lot of face by attempting to leave the valley. He hadn't thought that this rank 4 Lord of the Flames would actually want to burn everything with flames. This was intolerable to the golden dragon. A frightening dragon's roar rang out from the golden dragon's enormous mouth. The golden dragon had originally planned on leaving the valley, but temporarily gave up on his original goal. He didn't pay attention to the Cyclops and actually charged towards the Lord of the Flames. The golden dragon swung his tail wildly as he flew, but the flaming rocks were unable to leave even the slightest mark on his golden body. At the same time, Fire Grand Magus Marceau suddenly cheered in joy and said excitedly, "Chance, our chance has finally come." Turning his head to glance at Marceau, Han Shoa said calmly, "I think you should tell us your plan and intentions now. Otherwise, the two of us wouldn't be following you in a daze." The underground world of the Lord of the Flames is an extremely mystical existence. It's because of this mystical existence that the Lord of the Flames was able to evolve 4 times. I've researched fire magic for many years and discovered that there's a strange fire attribute energy in that place. This energy is completely different from the fire element and is even more mysterious. That mystical place not only created a grade 4 Lord of the Flames, but also nurtured a mysterious fire lotus and many strange rocks. I only discovered it by chance. Since the Lord of the Flames is fighting outside, I can use my control over fire magic to bring you two into that underground world and take the opportunity to take away some of the mystical things inside. What do you think? Marceau looked extremely anxious as she quickly explained to the two. All right. Han Shoa answered crisply without the slightest hesitation. This fire archmage named Marceau was definitely a powerful person. She was actually able to discover this place of extreme fire and understand that there was an element of fire that was different from the fire element within. It looked like she'd put in a lot of effort into this place of extreme fire. The boundary that had absorbed a large amount of fire element continuously tightened bit by bit, blossoming with a brilliant red light. The temperature inside also rose steadily until the temperature inside the boundary rose to around 40 degrees and became 3 to 4 meters wide. Only then did the temperature rise and space shrink stop. Let's go. Fire Grand Magus Marceau called out softly. The boundary brought the 3 of them around the battle between the enormous creatures and suddenly landed in the fiery crack on the ground that was spewing lava. With the existence of the Fire Lotus, Han Shoa didn't need to waste a huge amount of time to gather all sorts of materials. He could directly use a secret technique to form a large formation in the place of extreme fire, then use his blood essence to activate the formation and throw a zombie into the Fire Lotus. Based on the nutrients that the Fire Lotus had absorbed over tens of thousands of years and the dense fire elemental energy in the place of extreme fire, it would directly help an ordinary zombie evolve into a fire elite zombie. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Han Shoa absolutely wouldn't allow Marceau to take the Fire Lotus. After he left the boundary, he had already started to set everything up. As Marceau controlled the boundary and slowly approached the Fire Lotus, Han Shoa turned into a thick cloud of white mist and shuttled through the caves around the fiery red rock walls. In the eyes of Marceau and Han Shoa was taking the opportunity to collect some strange ores in the surroundings. What they didn't know was that under the cover of the thick smoke, Han Shoa had already quickly and successfully excavated the formation I needed to refine the Fire Elite Zombie. Although there was the Fire Lotus, there weren't any other materials to refine the Fire Elite zombie. Han Shua's blood essence had completely replaced the practice between the formation eyes. Fortunately, Han Shua had swallowed a 300-year-old blood essence grass and converted enough blood essence. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have been able to successfully use the large formation this time. After Han Shua walked around the surrounding rock walls and successfully excavated the formation eye, he immediately chanted an incantation and summoned the little skull from a distant plane. "Hurry up and bring a zombie that you approve of. He'll receive the same treatment as the Earth Elite zombie." Han Shua passed on an order. Without waiting for the little skull to nod in understanding, he sent the little skull back to a distant plane. Then, purple flames danced between Han Shua's hands as he activated his magical yuan. In the direction where the little skull had been standing, the purple flames danced in Han Shua's hands, creating a suitable temperature for that area. The little skull's body was purely made of sparkling white bones. After many times of forging and tempering, Han Shua had sufficient confidence in the little skull's body's toughness. He knew that this level of high temperature wouldn't affect him at all. However, if an ordinary zombie suddenly appeared in such a place, it would definitely be burned to a painful state by the high temperature. It was hard to say whether it would be directly burned to death. Therefore, in order to successfully refine the Fire Elite zombie, Han Shua had no choice but to make preparations in advance, lest he be roasted to death by the high temperature once he fell into this space. An urgent call came through the little skull from an infinitely distant plane. When Han Shua received this call, he immediately chanted an incantation. Then, in the area of suitable temperature created by magical yuan, the little skull appeared in front of Han Shua with an incomparably large zombie warrior in his hand. Perhaps the little skull sensed Han Shua's anxiousness, but he didn't have time to search in his haste and casually grabbed a zombie warrior with an unusually large head. "Alright, it's you." Time was of the essence. Han Shua had already set up everything. Seeing that Marceau and the little skull were already close to the Fire Lotus, he didn't have time to be picky. He grabbed the big-headed zombie and rushed towards the central fire lake. She didn't dare to descend another 3 meters to see what was happening below. The dense fire origin energy around the fire lake, under the influence of the formation, was all channeled towards the center of the Fire Lotus, providing sufficient nourishment for the Fire Elite zombie's formation. On the day that the Fire Elite zombie was formed, the Fire Lotus that it nurtured would very likely become a treasure that the Fire Elite zombie could control and help him obtain all sorts of strange abilities. 24 beams of blood-red light gathered towards the Fire Lotus in the center from the cave walls. The fire origin energy that had lingered in the entire place of extreme fire for tens of thousands of years was slowly nourishing the big-headed zombie's body through the Fire Lotus. With the protection of the Fire Lotus pistol, the big-headed zombie didn't need to endure the scorching heat. It only needed to continuously absorb all sorts of pure energy and cultivate according to the imprint that Han Shua had left in its mind. It would be able to continuously change its body and become a powerful Fire Elite zombie. Roar! A terrifying roar sounded from above the fire lake. The Lord of the Flames seemed to have sensed the changes in the Kingdom of Fire and couldn't help but roar. Through the Yin Demon's observation, Han Shua discovered that the Lord of the Flames, who had a slight upper hand despite fighting 1 against 3, had already given up on the battle against the Golden Dragon, Cyclops, and Silver Ape. It roared as it moved its enormous volcanic body, slowly walking towards the largest crevice in the valley. The Fire Lotus that was nurtured in the fire lake was a fire attribute treasure. It contained some strange power. As the master of the Kingdom of Fire, the Lord of the Flames must have some sort of connection with the Fire Lotus. Perhaps the Lord of the Flames had already left an imprint on the Fire Lotus and treated it as a taboo item. Han Shua had used the demonic magic formation and used this taboo item without permission. He had even imprinted a living being within it to absorb the enormous amount of fire origin energy in the surroundings. This must have alarmed the Lord of the Flames and made it come over to understand everything that had happened. At this moment, the Fire Lotus petals had already shrunk into a bud, slowly sinking into the fire lake. When Han Shua saw this, he immediately understood that he had succeeded. He began to scream in pain as he slowly moved upwards. Up until now, all of Han Shua's arrangements had gone smoothly. However, he still had no way of predicting the final outcome. According to Chu Kanglin's memories, Han Shua knew that after the fire lotus petals had shrunk, it would be very difficult to open it again without special methods and opportunities. However, as the master of this fire lake, Han Shua had no way of knowing if the Lord of the Flames had a way to open the fire lotus. From the very beginning, Han Shua knew that he wasn't completely confident in this matter. The reason why he had to do this was because he had no other choice. Otherwise, if he lost this opportunity, he didn't know when the Lord of the Flames would leave this place of extreme fire, nor would he have a fire grand magus bring him into this strange space. Therefore, even if he wasn't completely confident, Han Shua had to make use of this rare opportunity to plant the big-headed zombie into the fire lotus. As for the final outcome, whether the Lord of the Flames would be able to open the fire lotus, or whether it would kill the big-headed zombie, this wasn't something that Han Shua could grasp. It could only be said that it all depended on the will of the heavens. As Han Shua's figure slowly rose into the air, he purposefully withdrew the purple flames protecting his legs and used the high temperature of the fire lake to roast his legs. In an instant, Han Shua's trousers were charred black. His legs were exposed to the blazing heat, and in the blink of an eye, a large area was burnt by the flames. "Save me!" A mournful scream rang out from Han Shua's mouth, his voice urgent and desperate. However, under the cover of the thick smoke, Han Shua didn't have any expression of pain on his face. Instead, he was terrifyingly calm. The burning pain from the large area of his legs seemed to be happening to someone else's body. He was currently looking at the two people in the boundary above him with a bright expression. Fire Grand Magus Marceau watched as the fire lotus slowly sank into the lake of fire. She seemed to be extremely discouraged and had a face full of regret. She didn't seem to care about Han Shua's shouts as she kept murmuring, "My fire lotus, my fire lotus." On the other hand, it was the female knight Sophie who showed sympathy for Han Shua. She was drenched in sweat as she panted. She pulled on the corner of Marceau's clothes and said anxiously, "Let's save him first." Under Sophie's tugging, Fire Grand Magus Marceau suddenly woke up with a start. She looked down with a mournful expression and sighed. She nodded unwillingly and started chanting a magic incantation. A strong magical wave suddenly enveloped Han Shua's body. Amidst the crackling sparks, Han Shua's body was pulled by the fire element and suddenly squeezed into the boundary that Sophie and Marceau were in. When Han Shua had left earlier, a part of the 3 to 4 meter magic boundary had been cut off. Now that Han Shua's body had squeezed in again, the part that had been cut off didn't return. The magic boundary that Sophie and Marceau had been in suddenly became very crowded with Han Shua's addition. Right now, Han Shua's face was pale and weak. A large area from his knees to his feet had been roasted by the high temperature of the fire lake. Not only did it look very horrifying, but it also gave off an unpleasant smell. In the crowded boundary, the Fire Grand Magus didn't seem to be too willing to lean against Han Shua due to her identity, age, or other reasons. She forcefully retreated to a corner, causing the limp Han Shua and Sophie to lean against each other. Han Shua moved his body with difficulty and pretended to cry out in pain, seeming to want to sit up from his limp position. When his two hands were supporting the invisible boundary, he couldn't avoid touching Sophie's thighs because of the squeezing of the boundary. The temperature within the boundary had been maintained at around 40 degrees after Han Shua had left. Sophie was still sweating profusely, and her entire body was wet and uncomfortable. Her clothes were all wet and stuck to her curvaceous body. Under Han Shua's unintentional touch, he could feel the taut fullness of Sophie's thighs. He could even feel the powerful strength contained within her extremely elastic thighs. Originally, the burning of his two legs was intentional. This degree of burning wouldn't affect the function of Han Shua's two legs. Apart from looking a bit frightening and causing some completely bearable pain to Han Shua, it didn't have any other effects. Therefore, when Han Shua pretended to be in pain and wanted to sit up, he let out low cries of pain. He wasn't as miserable as he appeared to be. Therefore, when his arm unavoidably touched Sophie's slender thighs, he actually had the leisure to evaluate the elasticity and beauty of Sophie's thighs in his heart. Perhaps it was because the boundary was indeed very crowded, but this kind of action, which could even be considered frivolous, was only treated by Sophie as a helpless and unintentional carelessness. It didn't cause her displeasure. Her crescent brows slightly furrowed. Instead, she looked at Han Shuo with some sympathy, and said with a kind heart, "I'll help you." Sophie's soft voice rang in Han Shuo's ears. Then, under the pained expression of Han Shuo clenching his teeth, her body slightly crouched down. Her slender hands supported Han Shuo's shoulders, helping Han Shuo get up and help him sit down in the boundary. During this process, due to the crowding of the boundary, it was inevitable that the two of them would come into physical contact. When Han Shuo's arms were propped up by her, the skin between their arms was tightly pressed against each other. Han Shuo even accidentally used his shoulder to touch Sophie's firm and curvy breasts. "Thank you very much." When Sophie helped Han Shuo sit up from his limp posture, Han Shuo sincerely looked at Sophie and sincerely thanked her. "Don't mention it. This is what I should do." Sophie's delicate face had been red because of the high temperature, but the sharp-eyed Han Shuo still found that Sophie's face at this moment was even more rosy than before. Her expression also seemed a little shy. It seemed that the close contact between the two of them had indeed made this kind girl feel a little uncomfortable and embarrassed. Until now, Han Shuo and Sophie were still very close. Although Sophie deliberately kept a distance, because of the crowding of the boundary, the furthest distance between the two of their bodies would not exceed 20 centimeters. They could clearly smell each other's scent. The strong scent of a man on Han Shuo's body and the fragrant scent of sweat on Sophie's body blended together and were breathed in by the two young men and women. This kind of peculiar scent was like a miraculous medicine, nourishing Han Shuo's restless heart and giving Han Shuo an inexplicable throbbing feeling. Han Shuo gazed deeply at Sophie. Perhaps it was because of the high temperature, but his gaze was burning fiercely. When Sophie turned her head away uncomfortably, Han Shuo greedily took a deep breath and his expression returned to normal. He smiled brightly at Phoebe, then slowly closed his eyes and began to adjust his breathing, not letting go of any time to recover his magical yuan. Chapter 239. The Lord of the Flames' terrifying voice brought with it a violent power that could destroy the heavens and earth. It stopped all of the surging magma, and then flew down towards the fire lake at an even more ferocious speed. In that instant, the magic barrier that had been flying up with the magma was affected by the surging magma. Not only was it unable to rise higher, but it also rapidly fell towards the fire lake below. "Not good!" Fire Grand Magus Marceau exclaimed with a face full of fear. She said anxiously, "The Lord of the Flames is controlling the lava's descent. I've used up too much mental strength right now, so I can't control the barrier to fly out." Han Shuo, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Marceau. "So you're saying that we're trapped in the fire lake?" The kind-hearted female knight Sophie was also at her wits' end in this situation. She looked worriedly at the scorching magma that was sweeping towards them, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Fire Grand Magus Marceau revealed a helpless expression and said to Han Shuo and Sophie, "I'm very sorry. I don't think I'll be able to leave the fire lake with you two." "I'm sorry." A strong magical fluctuation suddenly came from where Han Shuo and Sophie were. Just like the last time when Han Shuo had left the barrier, the area where Han Shuo and Sophie were was cut apart by a sharp weapon amidst the sparks. It was directly removed from Marceau's barrier. Without the support of Marceau's magical elements, Han Shuo and Sophie were immediately drowned in the surging magma and fell towards the fire lake. "Rather than the three of us dying together, it's better for me to escape alone. This is something that can't be helped, so please don't blame me." Marceau murmured coldly to herself as she watched the two quickly drown in the magma and fall towards the bottom. Roar, the earth-shattering howl grew closer and closer. Marceau was shocked and didn't dare to stay any longer. She activated the barrier that tightly wrapped around her body and slowly moved upwards against the magma that was pouring down like a waterfall. "Ah!" The Lord of the Flames' loud roar drowned out Sophie's screams as she fell towards the fire lake. Other than Han Shuo, who was leaning close to her, no one else heard her screams of despair. Even female knights with great strength would instinctively show their cowardice when facing the threat of death and knowing that they were doomed to die. Such a desperate cry was not shameful. However, if this kind of exclamations were to ring incessantly in one's ears, no one would be able to bear it, and Han Shuo was no exception. "Miss Sophie, can you stop screaming?" Han Shuo said to the screaming Sophie with a pained expression as he held on to Sophie's waist with one arm. Strangely, the magical barrier that Marceau had left behind didn't suddenly shatter due to Marceau's departure. Instead, it was covered by a layer of dark light. The dense magma in the surroundings crashed into the dark barrier, but it didn't move at all. Only rays of dark light slowly seeped out of Han Shuo's body and tightly attached to the dark barrier. Sophie quickly recognized the situation after being berated by Han Shuo. Her bright eyes quickly scanned the surroundings and she suddenly cried out in joy, "We're actually not dead. Of course, I've just recovered a bit of my strength. I think we can still hold on until we leave this mysterious existence." Han Shuo smiled at Sophie and comforted her. Suddenly, Sophie realized that her waist was still being held by Han Shuo's arm. She immediately straightened her body uncomfortably and broke free from Han Shuo's arm, maintaining a tight distance from Han Shuo. Seeing that Sophie had already woken up from her panic, Han Shuo didn't purposely take advantage of her. He smiled apologetically at Sophie and said, "I had no choice just now, I hope you don't mind." Having escaped death, Han Shuo was in such a good mood that he let out another long howl. The black light swirling around his body cracked and shattered like an eggshell. Streaks of black light intertwined together like lightning and slowly sank into Han Shuo's skin. These wriggling black lights writhed on Han Shuo's exposed skin like nimble tattoos, displaying a soul-stirring, bewitching beauty. As Han Shuo let out a drawn-out dragon's roar, the black lights slowly receded and Han Shuo's skin returned to its normal color. "How much longer are you going to hold on for?" Sophie watched the series of changes on Han Shuo's body and couldn't help but glare at Han Shuo to remind him when she saw Han Shuo clinging to her waist. Because the protective barrier had shattered, Han Shuo was afraid that Sophie would fall directly from the sky. Therefore, in his panic just now, he'd once again used his right hand to wrap around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the elasticity and softness of Sophie's slender waist. The long howl from before had been indescribably pleased and satisfied. "Ah! I had no choice, I had no choice." Han Shuo didn't feel the slightest bit awkward as he chuckled, "I don't know if you'll fall to your death if I let go." Looking unkindly at Han Shuo, Sophie glared at Han Shuo and pointed below, "The ground is only a few meters above me, and there's an empty space around that hasn't been covered by lava. Do you think a knight who dares come to the dark forest alone will fall to his death from a few meters in the air?" "Ah! I don't think so. You should have warned me earlier." Han Shuo rubbed his head and grinned cheekily. He tightened his right hand around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the softness and wonder of her slender waist for a moment before letting go and letting her fall to the ground. Roar! Suddenly, the Lord of the Flames' strange howls sounded from the depths of the ground. Through the observation of the Yin demon below, Han Shuo discovered that the Lord of the Flames' enormous body had completely melded into the lake of fire. The fire lotus that had sunk into the lake of fire was held in its iron-like palm. Waves of enormous intent descended from the Lord of the Flames into the fire lotus through some mysterious power. Just as Han Shuo was on tenterhooks, the Lord of the Flames suddenly raised its head and howled repeatedly. It held the closed fire lotus as if it had found a treasure and carefully caressed it. The killing intent on its body vanished, and it hugged the fire lotus to its chest like a mother. The entire lake of fire was instantly filled with a strange motherly love. It can't be treating the fire elite zombie as its own child, can it? Han Shuo was flabbergasted as he guessed incredulously. Chapter 242. How is this possible? If you weren't a demigod, how could you not be restricted by the Forbidden Land and remain in the air? The Cyclops couldn't believe this reality, or perhaps he was afraid that his hopes in Han Shuo would be dashed. He had a look of disbelief on his face. Han Shuo chanted the most basic necromancy magic. The summoning of skeletons that had worked every time had no effect this time. There were no abnormalities in the dark and desolate space. This necromancy magic had failed. So it was like this. Han Shuo's heart jumped and he understood that the Cyclops wasn't lying. It looked like he really couldn't use any magic in this forbidden land. Wait! Han Shuo called out softly to the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon. His body abruptly rose into the air and broke through the shrouded black mist. However, just as Han Shuo felt that he should be able to leave the black mist, a vast, boundless, and strange power blocked the sky like a mountain weighing millions and millions of kilograms. Han Shuo fiercely broke through the air and crashed into it, causing great pain all over his body. However, he couldn't break through the shroud of black mist and leave this strange space. There was no need to try anymore. Han Shuo already understood that the entire area within 10 kilometers of the black mist was bound by this strange power. Just like the cemetery of death, he couldn't take a single step out of this place without opening the boundary. He landed dejectedly and helplessly, rubbing his buzzing head. Looking at the astonished Cyclops and Golden Dragon in front of him, Han Shuo spread his hands and apologized. As expected, the entire forbidden area is blocked by a boundary, and the same goes for the sky covered by the black mist. I think that we won't be able to leave the forbidden land without a special method. By now, the Cyclops and Golden Dragon had started to believe that Han Shuo wasn't a demigod like they'd guessed. With their hopes dashed, the two powerful beings didn't even have any interest in why Han Shuo could fly in the air when faced with the threat of death. They started to sigh in despair. Han Shuo could understand their dejection and despair when he saw that the two powerful beings had not only lost interest in his ability to fly, but had also stopped attacking Gilbert. Great Master, what should I do? I don't want to stay in this damned place forever. Let's continue my unfinished legend in the world of sensual pleasures. Gilbert was extremely anxious as he yelled in annoyance. Not a single being had been able to leave the Forbidden Land in the past 500 years, and there was no lack of super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans. However, when Han Shuo walked into this area, he only felt a desolate silence. There wasn't the slightest hint of life in this place. This meant that the super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans must have died long ago. Looking at the sky, Han Shuo discovered that the black mist that had permeated the entire area had gradually become thicker, perhaps because of his forceful charge. The dark, damp air was filled with an extremely dangerous and cruel aura. I think it's unlikely that we'll die of old age here even if we want to. Han Shuo murmured to himself as he sensed the changes in his surroundings, then suddenly cried out, "Careful, there's danger." Gilbert, who had been blaming the heavens and others, as well as the despairing Cyclops and Golden Dragon, sensed the terrifying changes in their surroundings when they heard Han Shuo's cry of alarm. Their survival instincts immediately kicked in, and they also tensed up, paying attention to their surroundings and preparing to deal with any danger that might appear. Dark mist swirled in the sky, and balls of thick, inky black smoke that couldn't be dispelled could be seen from time to time. An evil and terrifying power swept towards them with the force of an avalanche, making it difficult for them to even breathe. The power that enveloped the boundary weighed down on everyone's backs like a million-ton mountain. Even colossal beings like the Cyclops and Golden Dragon howled in the face of this terrifying pressure. This was a sign that they couldn't bear the pressure and had lost control of their minds. Gilbert, who was only rank 1, had already prostrated himself on the ground like a limp snake, unable to even stand up. Magical yuan circulated madly as a dark, shiny shield enveloped Han Shuo's entire body. Bolts of black lightning circled within the shield as the pure magical yuan tempered the shield over and over again, making the shield's defensive power more and more resilient. In the end, the barrier that protected Han Shuo's body was as beautiful and enchanting as the purest piece of black jade, while Han Shuo was like a living fossil wrapped in black jade, full of demonic charm. The Forbidden Land had imprisoned all of the mysterious powers in this world, but the magical yuan from another dimension wasn't something that could be extinguished by the Forbidden Land. Therefore, when Han Shuo frantically circulated his magical yuan to form a protective shield that he tempered over and over again, he actually withstood the enormous pressure and stood proudly, unafraid. A pair of deep eyes widened as he observed the changes in the entire area. Not a single bit of the sinister aura in the sky escaped Han Shuo's senses. His originally frantic heart began to beat rapidly, and Han Shuo's steady breathing was no longer calm as he actually started to pant. The strange power that enveloped the entire Forbidden Land actually made Han Shuo feel a trace of familiarity. This kind of power was even more enticing to Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm. A wondrous sensing force suddenly came from the demon infant in Han Shuo's body. The demon infant was like a small, bloodthirsty beast that suddenly smelled fresh blood. It could no longer endure the violent rampage in Han Shuo's body and urged Han Shuo anxiously, as if it wanted to do something. Pale green light flashed within the inky black fog that enveloped the entire area. Balls of light gathered towards Han Shuo's group of 3 from all directions. An enormous and terrifying aura of evil overflowed from the large balls of fog. As the pale green light continued to flash, the balls of fog gradually separated and changed shape, forming a sinister and terrifying face that pressed down. No! The Cyclops roared angrily and swung his enormous iron shovel at the sinister and terrifying face in the sky. The golden dragon also roared and swept his enormous dragon tail towards the sky, crazily sweeping towards the sinister face of a demon. However, the Cyclops and golden dragon's attacks landed in the air and had no effect on the malevolent phantoms. They fearlessly regrouped after dispersing and pressed downwards with frightening ferocity. Fiend, it's a fiend! Han Shuo suddenly cried out from within the protective barrier. Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm, suddenly removed the protective barrier that covered his entire body. Rays of bloody light shot out from Han Shuo's body as a thick, murderous aura suddenly wrapped around Han Shuo's body. At the same time, a ray of red light shot out from the top of Han Shuo's head. The demon's lair edge's purple and red light flourished as it floated above Han Shuo's head, continuously spinning and dancing. The normally calm Han Shuo's expression suddenly became sinister and frightening. His white teeth formed the shape of a demon's and his eyes were blood red. The murderous aura emanated from his body and entangled with the demon's lair edge above his head. Blinding bloody light shot out from both of them at the same time. The sinister ghost faces that covered the entire area made shrieking expressions, but didn't make any sound. The evil faces that had been pressing down on the Cyclops and Golden Dragon revealed panicked expressions, seeming to want to escape at all costs. However, with Han Shuo's demon's lair edge as the center, an enormous whirlpool had formed in the sky above Han Shuo and the demon's lair edge. The whirlpool was more than 10 meters wide, and a murderous aura swirled within it. Blood-red light flashed as waves of evil energy filled it. All of the fiends that had gathered over seemed to be attracted by the enormous whirlpool. All of them wanted to flee in panic, but none of them were able to leave. Under the pull of the enormous whirlpool above Han Shuo's head, the fiends seemed to be tied down by invisible ropes no matter how far they escaped, slowly moving towards the whirlpool above Han Shuo's head. The terrifying pressure that could topple mountains and overturn the seas disappeared in an instant. Gilbert, who had been lying on the ground like a soft little snake, straightened his back after the pressure disappeared. He looked at Han Shuo, who was causing a huge commotion in the air, and murmured to himself, "Great Master, what the fuck are you doing? Little dark dragon, just what kind of creature is your master? Just what is he doing? Why doesn't he have the presence of fighting aura or magic that a human should have?" The proud golden dragon couldn't help but roar when he saw the great commotion that Han Shuo had caused and heard Gilbert's murmurs. No matter what, we would have already been killed by those evil ghost faces if his strange actions had resolved the danger we were in just now. The Cyclops stared deeply at Han Shuo with one eye, but didn't discover that Han Shuo had revealed even the slightest bit of fighting aura or magic. According to his understanding of this world, he understood that Han Shuo might not be a demigod. However, Han Shuo's current actions were illogical and had removed the enormous pressure that had enveloped the entire area. This made the Cyclops not dare to underestimate Han Shuo at all. Now that his master had displayed his might, Gilbert also became arrogant. He raised his neck high and shouted loudly, "Damn it, how would I know what's going on? I just know that my master is very powerful. Otherwise, as a great dark dragon, why would I crawl at his feet?" The two enormous beings actually believed the dark dragon's words. Han Shua's current actions and the existence of Dark Dragon Gilbert were enough to prove that Han Shua was a powerful existence. It was because of this that the Golden Dragon and Cyclops accepted the Dark Dragon's rude shouts. It was as if they had forgotten the Dark Dragon's despicable actions from before and didn't dare attack him again. With such a powerful master, and this powerful human currently using his own unique method to remove the enormous pressure that enveloped the entire area, they didn't want to attack Gilbert at this time and attract unnecessary trouble for themselves. He glared viciously at the Cyclops, Golden Dragon, and Dark Dragon Gilbert, causing them to tremble from the depths of their hearts. A large green arm forcibly helped Dark Dragon Gilbert block this foot. After a series of rumbling vibrations, the green Cyclops sat on the ground and fearfully looked at the sinister face of Han Shua, who was slowly descending with a fierce roar. "Damned stupid dragon, he has already lost his mind and is no longer your master. Do you want to fucking die?" The Golden Dragon, who had finally stood up from his crouching position, couldn't help but shake his head and shake his tail as he roared loudly. He wanted Dark Dragon Gilbert to recognize the truth. Dark Dragon Gilbert seemed to have come to his senses. In the depths of his heart, he was unwilling to believe that Han Shua would kill him. He continued to muddle-headedly mumble to himself, "How is this possible? How could my master attack me? Stupid dragon, although I don't know what happened, I'm afraid that your master has truly lost his mind. He's very, very powerful now. That unlucky Golden Dragon and I don't have much strength left. Only the three of us together may be able to deal with your master." The Cyclops watched as Han Shua slowly descended from the sky. A vast and boundless murderous aura had firmly locked onto the three of them. He couldn't help but anxiously yell at Dark Dragon Gilbert. Shaking his large head blankly, Gilbert felt bitter inside. Although he felt despair and grief at Han Shua's ruthless and merciless killing, he still stubbornly said, "No, absolutely not. I can't fight my master with you, even if I die. Idiot, the three of us together can't kill him. We only need to resist or restrain him. We're doing this to save him, you stupid and damned dark dragon, do you understand the meaning of this?" On the other side, the Golden Dragon roared wildly in exasperation in the face of the threat of death. "That's right, stupid dragon, we're saving him, saving him. Idiot!" The Cyclops immediately understood after hearing the Golden Dragon's words and roared in agreement. The dragon race was a proud race. If it weren't for special opportunities, it would be very difficult for them to be tamed by the humans that they looked down upon. However, once a dragon established a contract with a human, their loyalty was unquestionable as long as their master was alive. Gilbert had spent some time with Han Shua. Han Shua's actions were very much in line with the Dark Dragon race's evil appetite. Even when Han Shua had lost his mind and attacked him viciously, he had never thought of resisting. This was just like the Dark Dragon race's lustful nature. It was an innate imprint of the giant dragon race that no one could change. The Golden Dragon was well aware of this race's characteristics and immediately changed the meaning of resisting. He turned resisting Han Shua into saving Han Shua, so as to resolve the knot in Gilbert's nature. Indeed, as if he had been enlightened, the roars of the Golden Dragon and Cyclops woke up the muddle-headed Gilbert. Chapter 244. The violent explosions continued for a while before the Forbidden Land gradually calmed down. The blazing sun hung in the sky, signifying that the Forbidden Land that had been sealed for 500 years had finally seen the light of day again. "Ah, light, this is the light of the sun." The Golden Dragon, who was covered in wounds, looked up at the blazing sun in the sky and felt the warmth of the sunlight on his scales. He sighed emotionally. As he sighed emotionally, some of the power that he'd lost after entering the Forbidden Land slowly filled his enormous body. The golden dragon's enormous body slowly rose from the ground. The dragon race's ability to fly had finally returned. The power that sealed the entire Forbidden Land has completely disappeared. We're saved. The Cyclops faced the sun with one eye as he lay limply on the ground, riddled with wounds. Although his form was a bit lazy, his green face was filled with the joy of escaping death. On the other side, Dark Dragon Gilbert shook his enormous head. The tears that had just filled his eyes were flung into the air like spring rain. His enormous body floated in the air and flew impatiently towards Han Shuo. He murmured to himself, I just knew that you wouldn't kill your most loyal servant. At this moment, Han Shuo's right hand, which was as tough as steel, had been forcibly broken by his left hand. The meridians in his neck and arms had ruptured, and he lay in a pool of his own blood, gasping for breath. Idiot, if it wasn't for my quick recovery, you would have died even if you had 9 lives. The powerless Han Shuo opened his mouth to berate Gilbert. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as soon as he opened his mouth, but Han Shuo didn't seem to feel it at all. His eyes that had regained clarity had a few traces of warmth and emotion. When the strange power that had sealed the entire Forbidden Land disappeared, Dark Dragon Gilbert's body sensed a familiar energy. He slowly took human form as he approached Han Shuo. When he stood in front of Han Shuo, he had already become a haggard human. After experiencing this ordeal, Gilbert's aura had changed slightly. Recover your body first. With his back to Han Shuo, Gilbert wiped away the moisture on his face and walked over in a seemingly relaxed manner. He smiled as he helped Han Shuo up from his limp position, silently standing next to him. Han Shuo chanted a necromancy incantation. A pure white little skull and the dumb earth zombie suddenly appeared in front of Han Shuo. As soon as the two stood in front of Han Shuo, their gazes simultaneously focused on Han Shuo. When they discovered that Han Shuo was in a miserable state and drenched in blood, they both abruptly moved to either side of Han Shuo and anxiously reached out their large hands to scratch his body, as if they wanted to stuff the blood on Han Shuo's body back into his body through his wounds. The little skeleton's purple eyes and the Earth Elite zombie's earthy yellow eyes were both filled with panic. They seemed to have a lot of life in them, waving their hands and feet to express what they were trying to say at such a busy time. All right. With the strength of my body now, this kind of injury won't be fatal. You don't have to worry about it. Han Shuo could understand the meaning behind the two's frantic and gesticulating explanations. Although their method of trying to stuff Han Shuo's blood back into his body was childish and laughable, it warmed Han Shuo's heart. Suddenly, the little skull shot into the sky, the bone dagger in his hand and the 7 bone spurs in his hand spinning in a whirlpool. An evil, cold, and inhuman-killing intent spread from his body as the 7 bone spurs pierced towards the Cyclops and the golden dragon like 7 rays of blood. At the same time, the earth zombie to Han Shuo's left sank into the ground as if drowning. A wave of earth-shaking tremors came from the depths of the earth beneath the Cyclops and golden dragon. Sharp mounds of earth rose from the ground, and the Cyclops was the first to be affected. He scrambled to dodge. When the little skull and the earth zombie appeared out of thin air and landed on either side of Han Shuo, the Cyclops and golden dragon only glanced at them casually and didn't pay any attention to these low-level necromancers. However, when the two fellows began to make their move, the deterrence and destructive power they caused the two colossal beings to be dumbfounded. They simply could not believe what they were seeing. The little skull and the earth zombies' movements were fast, and their attacks were as swift as lightning. When Han Shuo reacted, the two's attacks were already about to land on the heavily injured Cyclops and golden dragon. Hey, damn stupid dragon, are you just here to watch the show? We just helped you. The golden dragon was terrified as he frantically dodged the attacks of the bloody rays. He couldn't help but roar. Although the Cyclops and golden dragon could use their energy to recover, their bodies had long since become weak after a series of torments. In addition, although the little skeleton and Earth Elite zombie were small in size, the intimidation they caused was truly frightening. The golden dragon couldn't help but turn pale with fright and cry out in alarm. My honored master, these two fellows did help us just now. I don't think they have any ill intentions. Gilbert heard the golden dragons roar and remembered their friendship when the three of them had defended against Han Shuo. He couldn't help but try to persuade Han Shuo. I see. You too, come back. Han Shuo nodded indifferently and called out to the Little Skull and the Earth Zombie. The two reckless fellows, Little Skull and the Earth Zombie, immediately retracted their combined attacks when they heard Han Shuo's order. The 7 bloody bone daggers spun once and returned to Little Skull's back in a very short amount of time. The earth mounds that had been shaking the earth mysteriously disappeared one by one. The Earth Zombie, who had just disappeared to the left of Han Shuo, slowly rose from the earth as if it had floated up from the water. It stood on the left of Han Shuo as if it had never moved. Little Skull and the Earth Zombie discovered that Han Shuo was riddled with wounds. Gilbert naturally wasn't Han Shuo's enemy, so the two giants that had also clearly experienced a great battle were naturally treated as the culprits. It was understandable that they would attack without waiting for Han Shuo's orders. Actually, even when he had lost his mind, Han Shuo still had a rough understanding of what had happened. It was just that when he'd lost his mind, his existence had still been useful in helping the two enormous beings leave the forbidden area. Therefore, the strength that Han Shuo and the Demon's Lair Edge had just displayed wasn't something that they should possess. When the Demon's Lair Edge had pierced through the 500-year imprisonment of the forbidden area, all of the destructive energy had completely disappeared. Han Shuo and the Demon's Lair Edge had also returned to their original form in an instant, without the support of the frenzied energy from before. However, this time, both Han Shuo and the Demon's Lair Edge had indeed obtained great benefits. Although Han Shuo was still in the Bloodlust realm, the purest energy within the Demon Infant had caused Han Shuo's strength to skyrocket once again. After the Demon's Lair Edge had absorbed a portion of the energy, it was very likely that after a period of refinement and some special opportunities, it would truly be able to condense all sorts of chaotic negative emotions and form a soul unique to the Demon's Lair Edge. At that time, the Demon's Lair Edge would truly possess the power of a peerless weapon. Han Shuo, who had been wrapped in the black and red cocoon, only broke out after 8 days and 9 nights. His shattered right arm had returned to normal, and the ruptured veins on his neck and arms had become even more resilient. His height had actually increased by a few centimeters. His naked body was now tall and sturdy, with broad shoulders and a thin waist. The muscles on his body were well proportioned and firm, like pieces of finely carved rock. His eyes were deep and sinister, filled with the confidence of being in control of everything. Great Master, you've finally come out. Your pitiful servant has waited for far too long. Gilbert had a dejected expression as he stood pitifully by Han Shuo's side, loudly calling out Han Shuo's greatness. Looking at Gilbert in shock, Han Shuo asked in bewilderment, "What's wrong? Why are you pitiful now?" Gilbert had a pitiful expression as he first looked around, then complained like a villain, "Not only did those two bully me, they even dug up someone's ancestral grave. They're too evil." Han Shuo was taken aback when he heard this. He asked in astonishment, "What's going on? Look for yourself, look at what they've done. They even made me, the great dark dragon Gilbert, help them dig up someone's ancestral grave. I wouldn't do it, and they actually threatened me with a knife. They're too evil, too shameless, that detestable little skull." Gilbert felt extremely wronged. He pulled Han Shuo up into the sky, letting Han Shuo see the evil deeds of Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. When Han Shuo floated up into the sky and looked towards Mike Cotton's tombstone, he was dumbfounded by what he saw. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, those two really went a bit too far." When Han Shuo looked at the Little Skull with astonishment, he discovered that the Little Skull's purple demon eye was glistening with a strange light. Ripples of silver light suddenly circulated in the Little Skull's left claw that held a piece of white bone. The originally sparkling and translucent bone rapidly weathered in the Little Skull's left claw. It was as if the gears of time had been sped up 1,000 times. In an extremely short amount of time, the piece of white bone that had originally contained a strange power had been reduced to dust and scattered on the ground. Afterwards, the little skull raised his head proudly and picked up another piece of white bone, making a chewing motion towards Han Shuo. He then casually tossed the piece of white bone into the pile of bones around him. Without the little skull's further explanation, Han Shuo already understood that the little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie had the ability to absorb the bones of some of the powerful creatures in this forbidden area. Perhaps it was because the forbidden area had always had a restraining power, but not only were the souls of these powerful creatures unable to dissipate into the world, their bodies also contained a portion of the energy they had when they were alive. Although their bodies had completely rotted away, their bones still contained an abnormal amount of energy. It just so happened that this energy was a great tonic for the little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. No wonder the two of them had become grave robbers and turned this area upside down. Han Shuo smiled as he rubbed the little skull's smooth skull and patted the Earth Elite Zombie's shoulder. He said gently, "Hee hee, well done. In that case, you guys can collect all the bones that can be used here." After the Earth Elite Zombie was praised by Han Shuo, he foolishly rubbed his head and his body sank back into the ground. After a while, he appeared at the skeleton that was more than 10 meters tall and began to dismantle the bones again. Little Skeleton, on the other hand, was dancing with joy as he delightfully sent Han Shuo one message after another, describing his thoughts. After listening attentively for a while, Han Shuo nodded and expressed his understanding. "If you want to take these bones away with you and the Earth Elite Zombie, that's not a problem. I'll help you after you've piled up all the bones." In the message that the little skull sent, he wanted to bring all the bones with strange powers into the different dimension he was in. It seemed that he wanted to benefit more of the undead creatures that belonged to them. After understanding his thoughts, Han Shuo was first surprised, but then immediately expressed his understanding. After getting Han Shuo's approval, the little skull was very excited. After the 7 bone spurs shook for a while, he flew into the air and landed in the direction of the Earth Elite Zombie. He started working with the Earth Elite Zombie and continued to dismantle the bones of the huge magical beast. Han Shuo observed for a moment and discovered that they didn't want the entire skeleton of a super-rank creature. Based on their ability to sense the energy contained in the skeleton, they only dismantled the bones that contained energy. The ordinary and useless bones were casually tossed to the side. The dozen or so ravines in the area were littered with useless bones that had been carelessly tossed to the side. It looked like they hadn't been idle during the past few days while Han Shuo had been training. That 10-meter-long skeleton of a giant beast seemed to be their last prey. While the little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie were working, Han Shuo's eyes wandered around. Then, a tombstone engraved with Ermite Cotton's name attracted Han Shuo's attention. It was only now that Han Shuo realized that the tombstone of this eternal legend of Lancelot was originally only a small part of it. Now that the Earth Elite Zombie had dug up the surrounding gullies, the tombstone that was originally only a meter tall had grown to a height of 3 meters. From the top of the tombstone to the bottom, the tombstone that was buried deep in the earth grew wider and wider until it looked like a miniature mountain. This made Han Shuo feel very strange. Seeing that Han Shuo's attention was on Ermite Cotton's tombstone, Dark Dragon Gilbert seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Master, there's something strange about this large stone slab. Little Skull and the little zombie once asked me to move this stone slab, but I tried and found that this stone slab is very, very heavy. Even with my strength, I couldn't move it at all." "Oh, that's a bit interesting." As a member of the dragon race, Dark Dragon Gilbert still possessed tyrannical strength even in human form. Even if the tombstone was twice as large, with Dark Dragon Gilbert's strength, it was impossible for him to not move it at all. This made Han Shuo very surprised. Therefore, as soon as Gilbert finished speaking, Han Shuo had already flown to the front of the tombstone and reached out to touch the tombstone with a surprised expression. The tombstone was cold to the touch. Other than the few deep scratches where Ermite Cotton's name was engraved, the rest of the tombstone was as smooth as a mirror. After reaching out to touch it, Han Shuo didn't feel anything strange or uncomfortable. It wasn't much different from an ordinary stone slab. Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo pushed and shook the tombstone with all his might. He discovered that the tombstone didn't budge at all. It looked like this tombstone was as heavy as Gilbert had said, and it wasn't something that could be easily shaken. "Come here, dig this piece of land for me." With a thought, Han Shuo waved his hand at the Earth Elite zombie in the distance. The two undead creatures, Little Skull and the Earth Elite zombie, were only interested in the bones that were useful to them. This tombstone shouldn't be too attractive to them. Otherwise, with the Earth Elite zombie's ability, it would have long turned the ground under the tombstone upside down. Under Han Shuo's command, the Earth Elite zombie disappeared into the ground in the distance. Then, the ground under Han Shuo's feet shook. The ground that was buried deep under the tombstone began to roll like sand. The soft ground shook for a while, and two cracks abruptly separated from the bottom of the tombstone. The originally towering tombstone suddenly collapsed on a raised hill. The tombstone that was 7 meters in length was completely exposed. Even the bottom of the tombstone, which was as wide as a tree root, was exposed. That damned zombie! He clearly had the ability to move it, but he let me, the great Gilbert, help him move it. What a lazy bastard! Gilbert watched as the Earth Elite zombie, under Han Shuo's command, effortlessly uprooted the tombstone. He couldn't help but complain when he thought of his previous experience. Unfortunately, the Earth Elite zombie simply ignored Gilbert's clamor. After completing what Han Shuo had ordered, it appeared next to Little Skull a few dozen meters away and continued to concentrate on dismantling the huge skeleton. "Honorable Master, what are you trying to do?" Gilbert looked at the completely exposed tombstone and asked in confusion. "Let's take a look first." Han Shuo answered casually. He approached the tombstone and carefully observed it. His fingers lightly moved on the tombstone, his face pensive. A normal tombstone would never be 7 meters long. Furthermore, he didn't know what material this tombstone was made of. Even with Han Shuo's current understanding of various ores, he couldn't tell what material this tombstone was made of. In addition, its weight was beyond Han Shuo's imagination. Han Shuo couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. As his fingers lightly moved across the tombstone, a wisp of magical yuan appeared on his fingertip like static electricity. After being pressed down by Han Shuo, it fell into the tombstone. An enormous amount of dark element was suddenly transmitted to Han Shuo's mind through the magical yuan. This energy was surprisingly similar to the energy that imprisoned the entire Forbidden Land. Startled, Han Shuo hurriedly retracted his finger and looked at the brown tombstone in amazement. He murmured, "Strange, this energy should have already disappeared. Could it be that, the strange energy that enveloped the entire Forbidden Land came from the demigod existence Ermite Cotton? What is it, Master?" The little dark dragon, Gilbert, didn't hear Han Shuo's murmurs clearly and couldn't help but ask when he saw the surprise on Han Shuo's face. Taking a few steps back, Han Shuo instructed, "Gilbert, step back a bit. I'm going to blast this tombstone open and see what's inside." When Gilbert left as instructed, Han Shuo also stepped back about 10 meters and summoned the Demon's Lair Edge, infusing it with magical yuan. Although the Demon's Lair Edge hadn't truly become a peerless weapon after absorbing a large amount of killing intent, the killing intent contained within it already possessed a frightening amount of power. With Han Shuo's magical yuan infusing it, a sharp light shot out from the Demon's Lair Edge like a waterfall, shooting towards the tombstone with terrifying power. A series of crackling sounds rang out, accompanied by a brilliant flash of light. The sturdy stone wall shattered into pieces under the impact of the indestructible Demon's Lair Edge. Stone fragments flew everywhere. When everything had calmed down, the brown stones were scattered all over the ground. On the mound that supported the tombstone was a magic staff embedded with 3 purple crystals and emanating a dense element of dark, as well as an ancient handwritten notebook. Chapter 247. With Han Shuo's current strength, not to mention a character like Philide, Han Shuo wouldn't even be a match for the Dean of the Dark Major, Archmage Deo. Han Shuo strode over with a relaxed expression. A calm smile hung on his face, giving off an awe-inspiring aura. "Brian, you're finally back." Lisa's voice was filled with joy and surprise. She couldn't help but jump up in excitement and exclaim, "Yeah." When Fanny, who was sitting on the high platform, saw Han Shuo. The trace of gloom that had lingered on her face for the past few months seemed to have been wiped away by an invisible hand. Her entire being blossomed with a dazzling radiance as the corners of her mouth curved in a strange arc that seemed both happy and angry. Han Shuo had experienced a series of life and death battles in the past half a year, and his strength had skyrocketed non-stop. After becoming accustomed to grand occasions, his entire body naturally exuded an inexplicable aura. Even if he didn't purposefully display his strength, no one would dare underestimate him. Athena, focus on the test. I think you'll be able to do it. Han Shuo said with a smile to Athena, who had become nervous from the mockery and sarcasm of Phyllide and the others, after walking over. Thank you, Brian. Han Shuo's arrival was like a reassurance pill, causing Athena's uneasy heart to slowly calm down. Phyllide, who had been infuriated by Han Shuo's first sentence, had an ugly expression on his face. He stared darkly at Han Shuo and said, "If you weren't hiding from me, why did you disappear for half a year after my body recovered?" To be honest, Han Shuo really felt that a character like Phyllide was a bit boring. After experiencing so many battles with the strong, such a character really didn't have the right to make a fuss. The gap between the two was just too great, to the point that Han Shuo couldn't even muster the interest to deal with him. Aha! Han Shuo let out a strange laugh and glanced at Fred from the corner of his eyes. He shook his head sympathetically and spread out his hands with a sigh. You really are a person who thinks too highly of himself. What can I say to an idiot like you who has mental problems? After he finished speaking, Han Shuo no longer looked at Fred, who was trembling with anger. He turned to Fanny on the stage and took a deep breath. He looked deeply at Fanny and said, "I'm back." For no reason at all, Fanny's pretty face turned red. Then, as if she wanted to hide her true feelings, Fanny fiercely glared at Han Shuo and said angrily, "You bastard, you still know to go back to school?" Chuckling awkwardly, Han Shuo was about to explain something when Dean Deo of the Dark Major said in a low voice with an unhappy expression, "If you want to catch up, you'll have plenty of time after the exams. I think you should hurry up and finish up your major's business. We're very busy." After Deo's words, the teachers of the Dark Major also rushed Fanny and Jean, expressing that they had many things to do and couldn't wait any longer. Han Shuo, who'd been about to explain, spread out his hands apologetically towards Fanny on the stage. He then shrugged and took a few steps back, standing together with Lisa, Amy, and a few other necromancy students. He didn't say anything else. "Brian, where have you been for the past half year? Didn't you say that you'd be returning to Awesome City soon? Why have you dragged it out until now?" Lisa chattered incessantly as soon as Han Shuo came over. Han Shuo waited for her to finish her string of questions before smiling and saying that he'd gone to the dark forest to train for a period of time. Who does he think he is? He really thinks he's something. One of the Dark Major students that had been taken down by Han Shuo looked at Han Shuo's confident figure and couldn't help but snort angrily. I'd like to see how he plans on graduating early. I remember that he was only a novice mage half a year ago. Fred had been repeatedly provoked by Han Shuo, and his face darkened as he looked at Han Shuo, who was chatting cheerfully and wittily, and said coldly. This time, Athena was calm enough and wasn't as nervous as the last time. She cast a few necromancy spells very skillfully and answered a few questions very smoothly. She passed the beginner mage's trial very easily. After that, some of the necromancy students began their tests one by one. Most of the necromancy students' strength hadn't changed much, but Lisa had actually become a journeyman mage. The magical undulations in her body were noticeably stronger than the other students. After experiencing the tragic changes in her life, Lisa had suddenly become much more sensible and understood the importance of strength. She was much more diligent in training magic than before and didn't spend as much time playing around as before. She spent less time meditating and training. When all the necromancy students had finished their tests, Han Shuo finally walked out calmly and said, "I'm planning on graduating directly after coming back this time. Can I take the test now?" In the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, one would be considered to have graduated as long as they could advance to Adept Mage. Han Shuo had obtained the memories of Archmage Necromancer Clarendon's soul. After this period of training, he had long since grasped all the adept magics of the necromancy major, as well as a few lost magics of necromancy. The magic test was divided into 3 stages. The first stage was to answer some questions about magic, the second stage was to cast a spell of a certain level, and the third stage was to be assigned a mission for the student to complete using the knowledge they'd learned. That was the end of the test. However, within the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, those below the Adept Mage level didn't need to complete any missions. They only needed to pass the first 2 tests. With Han Shuo's current knowledge and strength in necromancy, the Adept Mage test was child's play. Han Shuo had even arrogantly skipped the Journeyman Mage test and set his sights on the Adept Mage level, planning on leaving the shackles of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force as soon as possible. Are you sure you want to skip the Adept Mage test? Dao glared darkly at Han Shuo from atop the round table and confirmed once again. Nodding his head impatiently, Han Shuo said with certainty, Mr. Dao, am I not clear enough? I want to skip the Journeyman Mage test and advance directly to Adept Mage. Alright then, we can begin. Dao snorted coldly, obviously a bit repulsed by Han Shuo's impolite words. He nodded at Fanny and Jean, expressing his agreement. Under the astonishment of the necromancy major students, Han Shuo walked onto the round table and calmly dealt with Fanny and Jean's answers. He then asked Dao and a few other dark mages about some related magical knowledge. Pausing, Emma first swept an odd glance at Han Shuo and then smiled at Dao, saying harmoniously, there shouldn't be any problems, I think he really can graduate. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.